On the 14th of July 2020, the Nigerian Air Force, and indeed the entire nation, was thrown into mourning as a result of the death of one of our shining young stars in the person of Flying Officer Tolulope Arotile'S, the NAV's first female combat helicopter pilot. Her unfortunate demise has elicited an overwhelming outpouring of condolences, prayers, and support to the Nigerian Air Force, as well as to the Arotile'S family. Indeed, there have been condolence messages from the President Commander-in-Chief, President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR, governors, members of the National Assembly, top government functionaries, and people from all walks of life came forward with their prayers, condolence messages, and support. This has no doubt been so, not just because of Tolulope's outstanding accomplishments at that tender age of 24, but also because of her sterling personal qualities of excellence, hard work, dedication to duty, confidence, and courage, which endeared her to her superiors, subordinates, and peers in the service. Unfortunately, because of the peculiar circumstances of the incident that led to her death, a rash of falsehoods, innuendos, conspiracy theories, and the likes have been propagated in the public space, especially on social media. The Nigerian Air Force sincerely hopes that the findings of the just concluded preliminary investigation into this unfortunate and painful incident will address all of the issues, especially those misinformed issues that have been raised in social media with respect to this tragedy. Moreover, while it would have been ideal for the entire investigation to have been concluded before details of the incident are released, the Nigerian Air Force, in sensitivity to the public concerns occasioned by the spread of false information, appreciates the imperative to provide more clarity at this particular very difficult time. Please note, and for your information, that the details being revealed today have already been communicated to the Arotile'S family, who ideally should be allowed to mourn their daughter and sister in peace, but for the unfortunate nature of the occurrence. In line with the normal procedure of the Nigerian Air Force, during such occurrences, an investigation was instituted to formally determine the circumstances of the incident. Accordingly, the preliminary investigation has revealed the following details. Firstly, late Flying Officer Tolulope Arotile'S, a squadron pilot at the 405 Helicopter Combat Training Group, Enugu, attached to the air component of Operation Gamma Aiki in Minna, having recently completed her promotion exams, was in Kaduna awaiting deployment for her next assignment. During this period, she stayed with her sister, Mrs. Damilola Adegboye, at Sabo area in Kaduna, visiting the base whenever that was required. On the 14th of July 2020, at about 10:55 a.m., late Flying Officer Arotile'S received a phone call from her colleague, Flying Officer Perry Karimo, a fellow helicopter pilot from the 405 Helicopter Combat Training Group, who wanted to discuss arrangements for their return to Enugu, requesting that she comes to the base so that they could work out the modalities. Subsequently, at about 10:55 a.m., the late Arotile'S placed the call through to Squadron Leader Diepre Batubo, the Group Operations Officer of the 405 Helicopter Combat Training Group, who was in Minna at the time. The call was made to clarify issues regarding her deployment. It must be highlighted that the call from Flying Officer Karimo, as well as the one to Squadron Leader Batubo, both took place before 11 a.m. on that fateful day. This is over 5 hours before the incident which led to her unfortunate and untimely death. Thirdly, Flying Officer Arotile was later conveyed from Sabo to the NAV base, Kaduna, by her sister, Mrs. Adegboye, where the deceased, that is Flying Officer Arotile, dropped her phone for charging in the house of one of the instructor pilots at their quarters. The house belonged to Squadron Leader Alpha Ekele. Her elder sister, after dropping the phones to charge in that house, later dropped her off at the base Mami Market, which is a mini market complex within the Nigerian Air Force Base in Kaduna. This was at about 4 p.m., where she proceeded to photocopy and laminate some documents. It was while she was returning from the Mami Market at about 4:30 p.m. that 3 of her former schoolmates at the Air Force Secondary School, now Air Force Comprehensive Secondary School, Kaduna, namely Mr. Nehemiah Adejo, Mr. Ibekele Folorunsho, and Mr. Festus Bayegun, drove past her in a Kia Sorento sports utility vehicle, SUV, with registration number AZ 478MKA. Must be highlighted that all 3 of the individuals mentioned went to the Air Force Secondary School, now Air Force Comprehensive School, with the late Flying Officer Arotile, and all 3 hail from Kogi State. It is noteworthy that Mrs. Adejo, Folorunsho, and Bayegun are all civilians who live outside the Nigerian Air Force Base, but were on their way to visit one Mrs. Chioma Ugu, the wife of Squadron Leader Chukwuemeka Ugu, who lives at Ekagbo quarters within the base. Upon recognizing their schoolmate, that is Flying Officer Arotile, after passing her, Mr. Adejo, who was driving, reversed his vehicle. So what happened was, she was returning from the Mami Market on the same side of the road, facing onward traffic, and they passed her this way. And they realized that this is their former schoolmate. So in an attempt to reverse, to meet up with Arotile, who was walking in the opposite direction, as I mentioned, in the process, the vehicle struck the deceased from the rear, knocking her down with significant force and causing her to hit her head on the pavement. The vehicle then ran over parts of her body as it veered off the road, over the curb and onto the pavement, causing further injuries. Flying Officer Arotile was subsequently rushed to the 461 Nigerian Air Force Hospital, Kaduna, for treatment, while Mr. Folorunsho, one of the occupants of the vehicle, who also happened to be a trauma nurse, an accident and emergency nurse at St. Gerard's Catholic Hospital, Kaduna, administered first aid. Unfortunately, Flying Officer Arotile was confirmed dead by the on-call doctor at the 461 Nigerian Air Force Hospital at about 4:45 p.m. that same day, 14 July 2020, as a result of the head injuries. So she was pronounced dead upon arrival at the Nigerian Air Force Hospital. The trio of Messrs. Nehemiah Adejo, Igbekele Folorunsho, and Festus Bayegun were immediately detained at the Air Provost Wing, 453 Base Services Group, Kaduna, as investigations began. They were subjected to toxicology tests at the 461 Nigerian Air Force Hospital. However, no traces of alcohol or psychotropic substances were found in their systems. It was, however, discovered that the driver of the vehicle, Mr. Nehemiah Adejo, did not have a valid driver's license. It must be noted too that traffic officers from the Kawo Police Station and the Kaduna State Police Command, as well as road traffic experts from the Federal Road Safety Corps, were also called in to provide support during the investigation. So these are essentially the findings of the preliminary investigation. Having carefully considered the foregoing, the preliminary investigation concluded that, firstly, the death of Flying Officer Arotile was caused by blunt force trauma to the head and significant bleeding resulting from being struck by the vehicle. Being a civil case, that's the second point, the matter will subsequently be handed over to the Nigerian police with a view to conducting further investigations and charging the suspects to court in accordance with extant laws. The Nigerian Air Force, being a highly professional and disciplined organization, would not want to join issues with any individuals or groups regarding the spurious allegations of foul play espoused in some quarters. From the foregoing and all of the evidence that has been so far put together, all of the witnesses that have been interviewed, the evidence that has been on ground, there is no iota of truth in any of these spurious allegations about foul play. There is absolutely nothing of the sort. Suffice it to say that Flying Officer Arotile was a pride to the Nigerian Air Force, in whom the service has invested massively in terms of resources, time, and energy. Consequently, it is ludicrous for anyone to even remotely insinuate malevolent intent on the part of the service, or indeed any member of the service, against one of its most prized assets. Furthermore, it is extremely sad and disheartening that rather than allow the Arotile family and the Nigerian Air Force to grieve for our dearly departed Tolulope in peace, many have chosen to politicize her death, while others are using the incident to push meritless, misguided ethnic and religious agendas. The Nigerian Air Force wishes to implore everyone to respect the sensibilities of all those who have suffered most by this loss, those who knew, who really knew Tolulope. And these are her family, her friends, and her colleagues in the Nigerian Air Force. It is of absolute importance that the memory of this fallen hero and our precious child is not tainted by the propagation of these misplaced sentiments and wild shenanigans. Before I end this address, may I respectfully and on behalf of the Chief of the Air Staff and the entire personnel of the Nigerian Air Force, as well as the Arotil'E family, express my profound appreciation to all those who in one way or the other have shown concern, support, and sympathy over this unfortunate incident.